The town of Copper Creek, baked beneath a merciless September sun. Dust swirled along its single main street, clinging to weather-beaten boards and tired faces. Hammers rang from the blacksmith, a wagon groaned under its load of supplies, and yet all sounds seemed to hush when a boy stepped forward into the open. Danny Fletcher was 14, thin as a fence post, his patched boots nearly giving way at the toes. Hunger had carved hollows into his face, but in his eyes burned a fire far older than his years. At his side clung a small figure, Lucy, his 9-year-old sister. Her tangled hair still caught glints of sunlight, a stubborn beauty against the grit of the frontier. She held a worn doll in her arms, its seams fraying like their fragile hope. Before them stood Ezra Blackwood, the rancher whose name carried weight across 3 counties. He was a wall of a man, broad-shouldered beneath a fine brown coat, his hat throwing shadow across a face hardened by decades of wind and sun. His mustache bristled like iron filings, his dark eyes steady, unreadable. He rested one hand on his gun belt as though the gesture were second nature. Danny's voice cracked but did not falter. "Please, Mr. Blackwood. The Morrison gang, they saw me when they robbed the bank. They're coming to kill me before I can speak. But Lucy, she doesn't know a thing. She's innocent. Take her. Give her a chance at life." The words struck like a stone in the silence. Lucy gasped, tugging at his sleeve, her tears falling onto the dust. "No, Danny. We promised Mama and Papa we'd stay together." The boy knelt, gripping her hands, his voice trembling yet resolute. "Sometimes to keep a promise, you break yourself first. You'll have a bed, food, maybe even school things we'll never have if we stay." Ezra Blackwood did not move, did not speak. He only studied them as if weighing their souls on an invisible scale. Around them, the town carried on, but in that circle of dust and desperation, the world held its breath. Ezra's silence pressed heavier than the noon sun. His hand drummed once against his gun belt, then stilled. Behind him, his black stallion, Thunder, stamped and tossed its mane, eager to move on. Danny's chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm, but his chin lifted as if daring the rancher to pass judgment. "You say Morrison's gang is after you?" Ezra rumbled at last, voice low and rough like boulders grinding in a riverbed. "Jed Morrison doesn't leave witnesses." "That's true enough. But what makes you sure they know it was you?" Danny wiped his sleeve across his nose, trying to stand straighter. "The tall one with the scar, he looked me dead in the eye." Recognition, he knew. Ezra's gaze shifted to Lucy, who clutched her doll so tightly its arms bent backward. Her blue eyes shimmered with tears, her small body pressed against her brother's. Ezra asked, "And you'd give yourself up so she might live?" Danny swallowed, forcing courage into his words. "She's all I have left. Our parents died in the cholera outbreak last spring. I'll not see her punished for something that ain't her fault." The air between them seemed to shimmer with the weight of choice. A tumbleweed skittered by, spinning in the wind, then collapsed against the hitching post. Ezra's eyes narrowed. For a moment, neither child dared breathe. Finally, the rancher leaned back, his voice level but unreadable. "What if I told you I might be willing to take both of you?" The word struck like a thunderclap. Danny blinked. "Both? Sir, you don't understand. Taking me will only bring trouble to your door. Morrison's men won't stop until I'm gone." "Let me worry about the Morrisons," Ezra replied, shifting the brim of his hat. "I've dealt with worse. My ranch is no stranger to outlaws." Hope sparked in Danny's eyes, quickly shadowed by suspicion. "Why would you do that, sir? You don't even know us. We could be lying or worse trouble you don't need." Ezra's lips tightened into the faintest smile. "Maybe. But I have my reasons. You'll work for your keep. My spread is big, and every hand earns his supper. The girl can help in the house. You'll be put to work with the men. Shelter comes with duty." Lucy raised her tear-streaked face. "We'd get to stay together?" Ezra bent slightly, his gaze softening for a flicker of a second. "That's the idea, little miss." Danny turned the words over in his mind, weighing danger against the bitter truth. The streets held no future. Winter was coming, and hunger gnawed sharper than bullets. He looked at his sister's trembling hands, then at the towering rancher. At last he asked, "When would we leave?" "Now," Ezra said simply. He mounted Thunder in one fluid motion. "A supply wagon passes in an hour. You'll ride with it. My ranch is a day north in the foothills." Danny knelt again to Lucy's level, whispering, "What do you think? We go or we stay?" Her answer came as a whisper, fragile but certain. "If you're there, I'll go anywhere." Ezra's shadow stretched long across the dirt as he rode away to prepare. The siblings stood alone, clutching the last threads of their old life, about to step into a future neither could yet imagine. The wagon rattled into town just as the sun tipped toward the horizon, its wheels carving grooves into Copper Creek's dust. Old Pete, the driver, flicked the reins, his tobacco-stained teeth flashing as he nodded at Ezra. Without a word, the rancher gestured for the children to climb aboard. Danny and Lucy carried little more than a burlap, sack their father's knife, a locket with their mother's picture, and 2 threadbare blankets. They settled in among barrels of grain and crates of tools. Lucy clutched her doll against her chest, whispering to it as though the ragged toy might steady her fears. Ezra rode alongside on Thunder, his eyes ever scanning the street, then the hills beyond. To the children, the wagon's slow roll felt like a dividing line, every creak of its axles pulling them further from the life they had known, further into the unknown. As the town shrank behind them, Danny wrapped an arm around his sister. "It's just us, Luce," he murmured. But it always was. The road climbed steadily, carrying them into foothills brushed with pine. By nightfall they reached a grove of aspen where the leaves shimmered silver under the moonlight. Pete built a fire, its sparks rising into the black sky. Ezra dismounted, silent as always, his face carved in firelight like stone. Danny finally dared to speak. "Mr. Blackwood." "How much farther?" "By mid-morning we'll crest the ridge," Ezra replied. His voice was a low rumble. "From there, you'll see my valley." Lucy, curled close to her brother, gazed at Ezra with wide eyes. "Is it safe there?" The rancher's expression softened a fraction. "Safer than most places in these hills, but safety's earned, not granted." Later, by the fire, Lucy whispered stories to her doll about mines where they had hidden during storms, about Danny trading his boots to save her from fever, about nights beneath the stars when hunger gnawed, but they kept each other warm. Ezra listened without interrupting, his gaze steady, as though measuring every word. Danny noticed, unease flickering in his gut. They slept beneath blankets Pete had loaned, Lucy's small hand curled around her brother's. Danny lay awake long after, staring at the wheeling stars. His mind churned fear of Morrison's gang, fear of Ezra's silence, fear of trusting hope. He closed his eyes only when Lucy's breathing grew steady, a reminder that for tonight at least, she was safe. Dawn found them on the trail again. Frost clung to the grass, but melted quickly under sunlight. As the wagon climbed, the land spread wide. Rolling meadows, soaring cliffs, streams flashing silver between stones. Eagles circled overhead. Elk lifted their heads from grazing. "Look, Lucy," Danny whispered, pointing toward a family of deer by the stream. "It's like one of Mama's stories." Lucy's face lit with wonder. For a moment, fear gave way to awe. "It's beautiful," she whispered, as though afraid to break the spell. By noon, They crested the ridge. Danny gasped. Below lay a valley vast and green, cattle dotting its floor like spilled coins. At its heart rose buildings, barns, corrals, bunkhouses, and a two-story home that gleamed in the sun. Ezra rained thunder beside the wagon, pride roughening his tone. Welcome to the Blackwood Ranch. The descent into the valley carried them along a winding trail, each turn revealing more of the sprawling ranch. Fences stretched in perfect lines, corrals bustled with horses, and smoke curled from chimneys of bunkhouses where men were already finishing their noon meal. Order and prosperity radiated from every corner, a stark contrast to the chaos Danny and Lucy had fled. Ranch hands looked up as the wagon rolled into the yard. Some nodded politely, others cast wary glances at the newcomers. Respect and fear clung to Ezra Blackwood like a second coat. A man stepped forward, sturdy and middle-aged, his dark hair streaked with gray. "Miguel," Ezra called, "unload the supplies. I'll see to our guests." Miguel's sharp eyes lingered on the children, curiosity flickering before he bent to his task. Ezra helped Lucy down from the wagon, his grip surprisingly gentle for such a hard man. "This way." He led them to a small stone and wood house set apart from the main buildings. Inside were two beds, a table, and a hearth cold but ready. For Danny and Lucy it was palatial. They stood in stunned silence until Lucy whispered, "Danny, is this ours?" "For now," Ezra answered. "But remember what I said, everyone earns their keep. Tomorrow the work begins." That evening, Rosa, Miguel's wife, brought them stew, bread, and fresh milk. Her Spanish accented words were kind, her smile warmer still. Lucy ate with shining eyes, licking broth from her fingers, while Danny, though grateful, could not shake the sense of waiting for the catch. Morning broke with the clang of a bell. Ezra's voice thundered outside. "Up! The day waits for no one." Danny and Lucy dressed quickly, stepping into a world already alive with motion. Ezra led them to the corral. "Boy, you'll work with Miguel. Start simple, mending fences, mucking stalls, feeding stock, hard, honest labor. The girl will help Rosa in the kitchen and garden. Everyone here contributes." "Yes, sir," Danny replied, though nerves twisted his stomach. The work was grueling. By midday, Danny's hands blistered, his back ached, and sweat stung his eyes. Miguel noticed his faltering steps. "Rest, muchacho. Work is not a race." But Danny shook his head. "If I rest, I fail." When Rosa called them for lunch, Lucy greeted her brother with flour on her cheeks and pride in her voice. "Danny, I baked bread. Rosa showed me how." She held up a lopsided loaf as though it were gold. Danny's heart swelled at her joy. Afterward, he returned to the corral where men wrestled with a wild bay mare. She reared, teeth bared, hooves lashing. "She's got the devil in her," one muttered. Danny studied the horse, noticing the way she favored one side, the frantic roll of her eyes. "She's not mean," he said quietly. "She's scared." Before anyone could stop him, he climbed the fence and slipped inside. The mare froze, ears flicking, eyes locked on the boy who dared to approach. Danny crouched low, speaking softly. "Easy, girl. I know what it's like to be hurt. No one's going to harm you." Step by step, he closed the gap until the mare's breath warmed his hand. Slowly, she nudged his palm, trembling but yielding. Gasps rose from the men. Miguel crossed himself. "Madre de Dios, he has a gift." From the porch, Ezra watched. His face betrayed nothing, but his eyes burned with intensity, as though a hidden calculation had reached its first conclusion. That evening, when the ranch grew quiet and lanterns glowed in the bunkhouses, Ezra appeared at the children's door. His shadow filled the frame. "Walk with me, boy." Danny's stomach tightened. He followed the rancher up a small rise that overlooked the valley. where cattle dotted the fields like ink across parchment. The sunset burned the sky in scarlet and gold, painting Ezra's weathered face in firelight. "I hear you calmed Tempest today," Ezra said without turning. "Yes, sir. She's not wild, just hurt. Animals don't fight without reason." Ezra studied him, then asked a question that cut sharper than any blade. "If you had to choose between saving your own life or your sister's, which would it be?" Danny blinked, stunned. "Lucy's. Always Lucy's. She's innocent. If it meant my death, so be it." The rancher's dark eyes probed deeper, like he was searching Danny's soul. "And if saving her required doing something wrong, something hard, would you?" "I'd do anything," Danny whispered, his voice trembling but firm. "Lucy is all I have." Silence stretched between them. The sun dipped lower. Then Ezra's voice dropped, gentler than Danny had ever heard it. "What if I told you the Morrison gang isn't after you at all?" The words hit like a gunshot. Danny staggered back. "That's not true. I saw them. The scarred man looked right at me." "They were caught 3 days after the robbery," Ezra interrupted. "Locked in Copper Creek's jail right now, waiting on a judge." Danny's knees buckled and he sank onto a rock. His chest heaved, fury and disbelief tangling in his throat. "Then why lie? Why bring us here?" Ezra's face, carved by grief and years, softened with something between sorrow and resolve. "Because I needed to know what you were. Whether you'd trade your life for hers, whether loyalty runs deeper than fear." The boy's breath came ragged. Relief mixed with betrayal, hope with anger. His entire world, built on the certainty of danger, cracked open to reveal something far stranger. Danny's fists clenched in the dirt. "So, it was all a test? You let Lucy cry herself sick? Let me think death was chasing us just to see what we'd do?" Ezra lowered himself onto a boulder opposite the boy. The fire of the setting sun caught the steel in his eyes. "A man's truth is only revealed when he believes everything is at stake. You showed me yours. That's why you're here." Danny's voice cracked with raw anger. "You played with us. We've lost too much already." For a long while, Ezra said nothing, the valley wind whistling between them. At last he spoke, softer, as though confessing to the night itself. "I once had a wife and a son. The cholera took them, same plague that stole your parents. Since then, this land is all I've had. Cattle, horses, men who come and go, but no blood to pass it to. No family." The revelation silenced Danny's protest. Ezra's shadow stretched long across the hill, bent beneath the weight of unspoken grief. "When I heard of you two," he continued, "children keeping each other alive when the world offered nothing, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, you were what I'd been waiting for." Danny's heart thudded in confusion. "Waiting for?" Ezra stood, towering once more. "I don't need hired hands, boy. I have plenty of those. I need kin, heirs. Someone who understands loyalty, sacrifice, the value of blood even when it isn't shared by birth." The words rolled through Danny like thunder. For weeks he had clung to fear of the Morrison gang, had begged only for Lucy's safety. Now the truth unfurled into something larger, something heavier. Ezra wasn't offering mere shelter. He was offering a name, a legacy. Danny's breath shook. "You'd take us as your children?" Ezra's jaw tightened. "If you'll have it, but choice is yours. Stay, and you'll be Blackwood's in truth. Leave, and I'll stake you with food and money enough to start elsewhere. But decide with clear eyes, not fear." The boys stared across the valley, the ranch bathed in dusk. Somewhere below, Lucy's laughter drifted faintly from the little house, carrying innocence he would die to protect. His chest ached with the weight of Ezra's test and the deeper truth now before him, Danny's pulse thundered in his ears. The ground beneath him felt unsteady, as though the valley itself tilted under the weight of Ezra's words. For months he had lived moment to moment, finding scraps, shielding Lucy, waiting for the next cruelty life would deal. And now, in a single evening, the rules had changed. His voice wavered. Why not just tell us from the start? Why not say you were looking for family? Ezra's eyes narrowed, lines deepening across his weathered face. Because words are easy, boy. Men will say anything to fill their bellies, but sacrifice, he jabbed a finger toward Danny's chest. That can't be faked. When you believed death was near, you proved what mattered most. That's worth more than promises. The boy's anger ebbed into silence. He thought of Lucy's tears in Copper Creek, her small voice pleading not to be left alone. He had nearly torn his own heart in two to keep her safe. That pain, that choice, it had been real, even if the threat was not. Ezra turned his gaze to the sprawling ranch below. I've built this place 20 years with my bare hands, but land and cattle mean nothing if they die with me. I needed to know if you had the strength to shoulder more than survival, to carry a legacy. Danny swallowed hard, still torn between betrayal and awe. And if we refuse, then you'll walk away with supplies enough to last the winter. I won't chain you, but if you stay as Blackwoods. The word lingered, heavy as iron, bright as fire. Blackwoods. A name carved into the land itself, now offered to two orphans who had nothing. Danny rose slowly, his small frame dwarfed by Ezra's shadow. He met the rancher's gaze, his voice steady. I'll not decide without Lucy. Her choice is mine. Ezra inclined his head. As it should be. Talk with her. Tomorrow. Give me your answer. As they walked back toward the small house, night spread across the valley, stars piercing the sky like silver nails. Inside, light spilled through the window, and Lucy's laughter carried into the dark. Danny stopped, listening to the sound, fragile, pure, a melody more precious than land or cattle. For the first time in his short life, he felt the weight of a future pressing close. Not just survival, not just tomorrow's bread. A family, a name, a destiny he had never dreamed possible. Dawn broke cold and clear, frost tracing delicate lace across the pasture grass. Danny rose with the bell, his mind still burdened by Ezra's revelation. He dressed quickly, then turned to Lucy, who blinked sleep from her wide blue eyes. "Luce," he whispered, kneeling beside her bed, "there's something I have to tell you." She hugged her doll, yawning. "Is it the bad men?" Danny's throat tightened. "No, the Morrison gang, they're not coming. Mr. Blackwood made that up. He wanted to see if I'd give myself up for you." Her lips parted in shock. "He lied?" "He tested us," Danny corrected gently, though a sliver of bitterness sharpened his words. "And now he wants more. He wants us as family. He wants to adopt us." Lucy sat up straighter, the doll slipping from her hands. "Adopt? You mean like Mama and Papa again?" Danny nodded, unable to hide the tremor in his voice. "He'd give us his name, his home, everything he's built, but it's our choice. We can stay, or we can walk away." The little girl thought for a long moment, her brows furrowed. Then her face softened, tears brimming in her eyes. "Danny, I want to stay. I love it here. Rosa teaches me cooking. I sleep in a real bed. And Mr. Blackwood, he's gruff, but I think he cares." Her words pierced Danny like sunlight breaking storm clouds. He gathered her into his arms. "Then we'll stay together." Later that morning, the children stood before Ezra on the porch of the main house. His dark eyes scanned them, as unreadable as ever, though a current of expectation rippled beneath his stillness. Danny lifted his chin. "We've decided. If you'll have us, sir, we'll be Blackwoods." For the first time since they met, Ezra's expression cracked. A shadow of grief lifted, replaced by something fierce and unguarded relief, perhaps even joy. He placed a hand on Danny's shoulder, another on Lucy's small head. "Then from this day forward, you're mine, blood or not. You're my kin." Lucy smiled through tears. "Papa Ezra," she whispered. The name struck the rancher silent. His eyes glistened, though he turned quickly toward the yard, voice gruff again. "Work to be done!" "Much to teach you both." But Danny saw it, the tremor in his jaw, the way his shoulders squared as though a new weight, long carried alone, had finally been shared. Life on the Blackwood Ranch settled into rhythm. At sunrise, Danny joined the men in the corrals, learning to mend fences, rope calves, and ride the range. His body toughened under the strain, muscles forming where once there had been only hunger and bone. At first he stumbled, hands blistered and legs shaking, but each evening he returned to the little house with pride, knowing he had earned his place. Lucy thrived beneath Rosa's gentle guidance. She learned to knead dough until her arms ached, to chop vegetables with a steady hand, to stir pots over the crackling fire. Soon she laughed again, her voice ringing across the yard as she carried baskets of bread to the bunkhouse or gathered eggs from the coop. The girl who once clutched a doll for courage now carried herself with budding confidence. Ezra watched them both in silence, his gaze heavy, yet protective. On rare evenings he spoke of cattle drives, of winters that starved weaker men, of storms that could flatten barns. His stories were lessons disguised as memories, each word shaping the children's understanding of what it meant to hold land and life together. One evening, Danny returned from the pastures to find Lucy chasing a foal near the corral, her laughter trailing like wind chimes. Ezra leaned on the fence, arms folded. "She's happy," the rancher murmured, almost to himself. Danny nodded. "Happier than I've ever seen her." Ezra's eyes shifted to the boy. "And you?" Danny hesitated, then answered honestly. "I'm tired, sore, sometimes scared I'll fail. But I feel like I belong." The rancher's mustache twitched into what might have been the shadow of a smile. "Good. Belonging's worth every blister." Winter crept down from the mountains, painting the valley in frost. The ranch hands drove cattle to sheltered pastures, and Danny rode with them, clinging to his saddle through sleet and biting wind. More than once he nearly fell, but Miguel's steady hand caught him. "You ride like fire, muchacho," the foreman said, pride softening his weathered face. At night, Lucy sat by the hearth, practicing letters Rosa had begun teaching her. She scratched her name into a scrap of paper, then looked up at her brother. "Danny, soon we'll write Blackwood, too." The words filled the small room with warmth greater than the fire. Danny ruffled her hair, heart swelling with a hope he'd never dared dream. Ezra entered just then, carrying adoption papers freshly returned from the capital. He laid them on the table, his voice quiet but firm. "It's done. You are Blackwoods now, not tomorrow, not someday, today." Lucy threw her arms around him without hesitation. Danny followed slower, awkward, until Ezra's strong arms closed around them both. For the first time, the rancher allowed himself to be simply a father. Snow soon blanketed the valley, muffling the world in white. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the lowing of cattle echoed against the mountains. Danny rose each dawn to break ice from the troughs, his breath clouding in the frigid air. Lucy carried baskets of bread and warm broth to the men, her cheeks red from the cold, but her eyes shining with purpose. On Christmas morning, Rosa showed Lucy how to shape cookies with sugar, real sugar, a luxury the girl had only dreamed of. She raced outside to find Danny, her laughter sparkling like frost. "Danny, cookies with sugar! Rosa says they're for us!" He grinned, marveling at her joy. "Looks like Santa finally found Copper Creek." Ezra stood nearby, watching. The hard lines of his face softened as Lucy tugged him into the kitchen to taste her creation. He bit into the cookie, nodded once, and muttered, "Not bad." But Danny saw the glisten in his eyes, the way his shoulders eased as though the ranch finally felt full. That night, Ezra called them to the porch. Stars blazed above the snow-laden valley, the air sharp and clear. He placed a hand on each child's shoulder. "I built this land with sweat and blood. For years it felt empty. But now," he broke off, his voice thick, "now it has meaning because you're here." Danny's heart swelled. For so long he had been only a boy scraping to survive, carrying his sister on his back through alleys and hunger. Now, standing beneath the endless western sky, he felt rooted at last. Lucy pressed against Ezra's side, whispering, "I love you, Papa Ezra." The rancher closed his eyes, drawing a slow breath, and whispered back, "And I love you, little miss." As winter deepened, the Blackwoods, by blood and by choice, faced it together. No longer orphans, no longer alone, but a family forged in trials and sealed by loyalty. Danny looked across the valley one morning, the snow glittering like silver dust, and thought of the boy he had been in Copper Creek, the boy who begged for his sister's safety. That boy was gone. In his place stood a young man with a future, a sister with a home, and a father who had chosen them. And for the first time, he dared to believe that tomorrow was theirs to claim. The valley lay quiet beneath the rising sun, the snow slowly melting into silver streams that threaded through the meadows. Smoke rose lazily from the chimneys of the Blackwood Ranch, carrying the scent of bread and wood fire. Danny stood on the same ridge where Ezra had once revealed his secret test, the wind tugging at his coat. Beside him, Lucy spun in circles, laughing, her scarf trailing behind her like a banner. He watched her with a heart no longer weighed by fear. The boy who once begged for her safety had been reborn into something stronger, a brother, a son, a young man with roots deeper than survival. Below them, the ranch stretched wide and alive, no longer just Ezra's empire of cattle and timber, but their home. Ezra approached slowly, his boots crunching over frozen earth. He stopped beside them, his broad frame outlined against the morning light. "When I was young," he said, voice low, "I thought strength was measured in land, in cattle, in the size of a man's shadow. But none of it mattered when death came to my door. I built this ranch, larger, stronger, but it stayed hollow. Until you two." Danny looked up at him, seeing not just the feared rancher of Copper Creek, but the man beneath, scarred by loss, searching for meaning. Ezra's gaze swept across the valley. "The world will tell you blood makes family, but I've learned it's something else. It's who you'd bleed for, who you'd starve for, who you'd stand beside when the storm tears everything apart." Lucy slipped her small hand into Ezra's, her eyes shining. "Then we're family forever." Ezra's jaw worked, emotion roughening his voice. "Forever." The truth of those words hung in the air, as solid as the mountains, as eternal as the river that cut through the valley. Danny breathed deep, the cold air burning his lungs, and felt gratitude rise like prayer. They had been tested not by bullets or gangs, but by the crueler trials of hunger, loss, and fear. And in the end, what saved them was not luck or strength of arms, but loyalty. The choice to love fiercely, even when it hurt. He turned to his sister, to the man who had become their father, and realized that the harsh world of the frontier had given them its rarest gift, not safety, not wealth, but belonging. As the sun climbed higher, spilling gold across the land, Danny whispered to himself words that felt carved in his bones. Family isn't given, it's chosen. And once chosen, it's worth everything. Ezra heard him and nodded, his dark eyes glistening. Together they stood on the ridge, the rancher, the boy, and the girl, bound not by past wounds, but by a future they would forge side by side. And in that moment, Copper Creek's orphans became more than survivors of the frontier. They became its heirs,